Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Inclusive Design 24, brought to you in partnership with Barclays Access, the Paciello Group, Intopia, Microsoft Edge, and Open Access Technologies. Please don't forget you can subscribe to Inclusive Design 24 on YouTube by just clicking that subscribe button. And please also don't forget to follow ID24Conf on Twitter. And if you have any questions for the presenters, please tweet them using the ID24 hashtag. We'll make sure we ask them at the end of our session.
And hello to all of our participants at ID24U meetups. Right now we have a bunch across the US. We have University of Massachusetts in Amherst, Massachusetts with a bunch of participants. University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, Michigan. I think they're gathered at the Hatcher Graduate Library waiting. Nebraska Digital Accessibility Meetup in Lincoln, Nebraska. Northern Arizona University Disability Resources in Flagstaff, Arizona, and just added to the list is the University of the Pacific Center for Teaching and Learning in Stockton, California. Welcome all, and thank you for participating. And co-hosting with us today, we have Terrence Eden, who's going to take over from here.
Thank you very much, and it's great to see just so many people joining in on the live stream. We've got a brilliant talk coming up. We have Reinaldo Ferraz talking about the power of alt and lang attributes, which just sounds brilliant. So, Reinaldo, over to you.
Thank you so much. And hi, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on you are. And first of all, congratulations for the event. And thank you so much for the invitation to speak in this conference among a lot of experts in web accessibility. I hope I can share with you some valuable information about some research we are performing here in Brazil, especially about the alt attribute. Well, my name is Reinaldo Ferraz, so the accent is fine. The way you describe it, it's fine. I'm from São Paulo, Brazil. And well, I have a challenge here to speak for you for around 30 minutes about only 2 HTML attributes. It looks like a crazy talk, but I'm planning to show you that these attributes are very important for web accessibility and can bring a lot of benefits when you consider their use. This is my picture. I work with web development since 1998. And I started to focus my efforts on web accessibility around 2004, when a law here in Brazil considered for the first time accessibility on websites. And then I fell in love for web accessibility. And this is my Twitter handle, Reinaldo Ferraz, where I usually share things related to web accessibility. I work for NICBR, at the Study Center on Web Technologies in Brazil, and for the W3C Brazil office. I'm in charge of web accessibility and open web platform projects. I'm leading some translations here, authorized translations for web accessibility documentation from W3C, publishing booklets. In fact, my job here at ceweb.br includes spread web accessibility best practices and guidelines for the Brazilian community. And I'm part of some W3C working groups. But nowadays, I'm more active at the publishing work group. And it's interesting. This group is discussing digital publishing, and it's good to see that the topic accessibility is always part of this discussion, especially because there are a lot of people from the DAISY consortium at this working group. And both W3C Brazil and ceweb.br are initiatives from the Brazilian Internet Steering Committee. It's important to bring this discussion to the Brazilian scenario and incentive the Brazilian community not to only adopt the standards, but contribute and collaborate with the international consortium and the international development standards. Well, I'm here to talk about these 2 attributes. It looks very simple to use. The alt attribute is used inside an IMG element to describe images, and the lang attribute is used to set or to change the language of the page or any element. I just could say that this is the end of the presentation and say thank you, but it's not only this. There are a lot of important things to know about these two attributes, and I would like to share you some of them with you. First, the alt attribute. The alt attribute is used to describe images on the web, to bring context to the user. And it's interesting to see that this is not a new feature from HTML. This is part of the documentation since the HTML2. Images on the web were proposed in 1993. This is an image from an email from Mark Anderson, the guy who invented the Mosaic browser, speaking about the new proposal for the web, the IMG element that can be embedded in an anchor element and become an icon to click, for example. 2 years later, at the same list, one person suggests that the IMG element should have an attribute to describe the image, considering the access from people who cannot see the image or if the image cannot be loaded. It's interesting because at this time, W3C was just an email list, not this huge consortium with the structure that they have now. And it's interesting to see this in this message. Then it would say that the alt text is a perfect substitute for the image. And so I think he's right, this affirmation. Well, at this conference, I think I don't need to tell you so much how important this attribute is for accessibility. You know that describing images is important because, especially for people who are using a screen reader, can understand the content of the image. But I will detail other important things about this attribute. Well, in a simple way to describe this attribute shows the content when the image cannot be seen, considering a screen reader access, or even if the image cannot be loaded. And there are some best practices to describe images on the web. First, it's not necessary to use, for example, picture of Leone Watson or image of a book, and depending on the context, you can be direct like Leone Watson or just book. And it's good to avoid the long descriptions and focus on the important elements of the image. Nowadays, there is a lot of technology to provide the image description. Facebook is using automatic image descriptions, considering the elements recognized by the social media. The problem is that this image recognition is not so perfect yet, like this picture. This is a picture of me smiling, drinking a Guinness beer in a pub. But the description is Reinaldo Ferraz, smiling, sitting, and drink. Nowadays, Facebook allows us to edit and change this image description. So this is a huge evolution using image recognition to help people understanding the image through this alt attribute. And the alt attribute is important for accessibility in several open web scenarios. And these scenarios include the ePub format. The ePub format is a package of open web technologies such as HTML and CSS. And it's possible to insert images in an ePub book using the HTML markup, the same way that you insert an image in a web page. And to guarantee that these images should be accessible, the alt attribute should be declared in each image, as we do when we develop some web page. And well, since the beginning, the ePub documentation requires the alternative text for images. So ePub is a package of open web technologies, and you can insert images, CSS. So if you insert images in an ePub, some screen readers can identify this image, and if you don't have the alt attribute, this image will not be accessible for people who are listening to the content of this ePub. But going beyond the web accessibility, the alt attribute is important for search engine optimization. Here at ceweb.br, we performed some studies about how search engine indexed content from alt and title attributes, and we published in an academic paper with our conclusions, and that's what I will show you here at this presentation. I'll let the link here for the paper, for the complete paper. The motivation for this study was to show, especially for the Brazilian community, what that web accessibility techniques can bring benefits for search engine optimization. Some companies here in Brazil still think that accessibility is not an important thing to consider, and we try to show them other benefits to consider web accessibility in their projects. We also performed another study on accessibility, SVG, and SEO, but I will show you in another opportunity, but I will let the link at this presentation. The way we performed this study was the following. A picture of a bread, a cent clock, and a zoom map were published in a WordPress environment, a simple WordPress environment without any description. We waited for around 2 weeks to index and collect the results. Later on, we filled all the alt attributes with the proper description, and then we compared the results. We performed the same tests considering the text inside the title attribute with different text strings. We choose to compare the title attribute because it's very common to see some people using the title attribute to describe images. We checked the results at Google, Yahoo, Bing, and DuckDuckGo. And at the end of the test, we could realize how the search engine indexed this content inside alt attribute. And it's possible to search for a specific term inside this image description. But on the other hand, only Google index the content in alt attribute, and none of them index the content in title attribute. Well, at least Google indexed the content inside alt attribute, but none of them care about the content inside the title. We performed another test using 3 search engine optimization tools. They called Site Analyzer, WooRank, and SEO Workers. They are free search engine optimization evaluations tools to use it freely, but I prefer to choose this one because they could measure multimedia and image elements at the page. So using these tools, we perform the same test. We run these tools without the alt attribute. Filled, and then with the alt attribute completed, and then use these tools, we could check how the alt and the title attributes are considered for search engine optimization. This is a screenshot of the Site Analyzer showing that there are some problems with image descriptions. This next slide showing the same tool with the alt attribute filled. You can see that there are no issues considering image descriptions on the page. And the same happened with the 2 other tools when we performed the test without the alt filled. At this tool, WooRank, we could identify that the average page score increased when we insert the alt attribute at the page. And considering the title attribute, none of them present benefits of its use. So the conclusion regarding the search engine evaluation tools is that alt attribute is considered and it's important for search engine optimization, but the title attributes not. So considering these 3 tools, at least none of them consider the content inside the alt attribute for search engine optimization. And we performed another test to identify which text Google indexed when there is no alt attribute on images, considering the search for images. We insert a paragraph before and after a picture of a clock radio without alt attribute, and we wait for some days and perform the search again. Performing a search on images at the website using the term clock radio in Portuguese we can see that the first result of the picture is the clock radio is the picture of the clock radio inserted in our web page. But the text on the Google image details shows the text right above the picture. When you fill the alt attribute in the IMG element, the text on Google results display in image search is the description provided by the alt attribute, not for the text close to the picture. Well, at the end of this research, we could confirm how important this attribute is for accessibility and SEO, and how Google manage this content close to a picture without the alt attribute in a search for images. And well, we think that it's a good approach, especially considering when we talk, especially for companies that are not so familiar with accessibility. We say, oh, consider web accessibility techniques that can bring benefits for the search engine optimization. And it's becoming a nice approach, and I think can make them consider these web accessibility techniques. And it's possible to use other techniques to describe images on the web, even if this image came from a CSS file. You can use like ARIA attributes, such ARIA label, to describe images, but the text inside ARIA label are not indexed by search engine. At this study that we performed about SVG and SEO, we tested the ARIA label in search engine tools, and none of them index the content inside ARIA label. Well, now I will show you some nice features and benefits of the use of the lang attribute. It's a very important attribute because in our native idiom here in Brazil, it's not English, and sometimes localizing content is a challenge, and we do not need to let the browser or assistive technology guess the language. It should be part of the web page semantic. So the lang attribute is used to specify the language of the page or any element that contains text. It is a global attribute. It means that you can use it in any HTML element. And the markup is very simple. You just need to set the lang attribute into the HTML element, and then you can use it every time you need to change the language of the page. If I have a paragraph in Portuguese and part in English, I can use the span element to set each language of the page. Well, the most common languages are simple to remind. EN for English, ES for Spanish, FR for French, and PTBR for the Brazilian Portuguese. And using only PT, consider the standard Portuguese. I think it's the same for English, like the American and British English. And it's interesting because you also have option to set the Klingon language, like the Star Trek race, using the TLH in lang attribute. The W3C validation service verify the use of the lang attribute and set an alert when it's not present at the page. So it's mandatory to set the language of the page at least at the HTML element. But if you are using a value out of IANA table, the validation service will alert you that this is not right. So let's talk about the benefits of the use of lang attribute. Considering the whole work for internationalization of web content, accessibility is an important topic for the use of this attribute, especially for people who are using screen readers. If you're using a screen reader and the screen reader are set to identify the language of the page, probably the screen reader will read this part of the Queen's song properly, like, is this the real life? Is this just fantasy? Caught in the landslide, no escape from reality. Regarding my English accent and my ability to sing, the pronunciation is almost right. But if you do not set the lang attribute in the page and the screen reader do not change the language, it could bring a lot of problems. For example, here in Brazil, most of the screen readers are set for the Brazilian Portuguese. And if you do not change the lang attribute in a web page containing English text, the screen reader probably will speak like this. Is this the real life? Is this just fantasy? Couch in a landslide, no escape from reality. And this is just an example for English language. There are a lot of issues considering different languages and problems with the lang declaration. It will help you, especially in the future, for another kind of assistive technology such as sign language translators. The signs are different, and each avatar should consider the semantics for the text block to present the correct signs at the correct language. So the sign language in Brazil is different from the sign language from the United States. So there are some specific characteristics for each one. And the semantic for sign language is very important, especially to identify similar words in other idioms with different meanings. For example, here in Portuguese, the word embaraçada means embarrassed, but in Spanish, embarazada means pregnant, and it could bring problems to translate content if the language is not set at the page. Still at the accessibility topic, but considering a way to style according to the content, you can use the lang attribute to change some fonts and provide the best way to see some content. For example, if I have a web page in English and you can set a font properly for each idiom, I'm setting in this example, the Arabic idiom using traditional Arabic font family, and then I can set the direction of the text according to the language that I declared. So for text in English, I could consider the direction from left to right, and in Arabic language or another one, I could consider the direction from right to left. And I can still use styles to customize elements considering their language. Depending on the language, I can change the style for each part of the page for each idiom. In this example here, I put three idioms in English, Portuguese, and French in three containers. And I could change the background of each one only using CSS, considering the language defined in each element. So I could make some visual changes without putting some code inside HTML, just setting the correct language of the page. Hyphenation, it's interesting because hyphenation needs to consider the lang attribute to identify the best way to separate the syllables. If you do not declare the lang attribute with the correct idiom, the hyphenation doesn't work when you insert this in CSS. If you use just the CSS hyphens for block text, this block text does not apply the hyphenation. It just works when I declare the lang attribute at the page or at the element. This example shows two paragraphs. Both are defined to hyphens, but only one has the lang attribute. And the one with the lang attribute, I could split the syllables properly according to the idiom. And most of the browsers support this CSS feature, but only Firefox does not require a prefix for that anymore. Chrome has some partial supports, and so nowadays it's possible to set hyphens, but only if you declare the language of the page. So just summarizing the presentation in a simple way. Use the alt and lang attributes in your web projects. They break some important web accessibility barriers, especially for screen reader users, and bring a lot of benefits to make the content available for more people. I think I speak a little bit fast because this is my last slide. But okay, I'm here available to talk a little bit. And well, thank you so much to invite me for this nice event.
Thank you, Reinaldo. We appreciate you taking the time, of course. I think we have some questions coming in from Twitter.
Yeah, there's been a bunch. People seem to really enjoy this talk. It's
Brilliant.
Really timely. So, excuse me. Let's start with this one from Laura. Is there a method to set the language of an alt tag when it's different from the page's language?
Oh, sorry, I didn't get my phone doesn't work. Sorry.
Sorry. Is there a way to set the language of an alt tag when it's different from the lang attribute of the page? So if you've got a page in French, but you want an alt tag in English.
Yes, it's possible. The lang you can use the alt and the lang attribute, and you can define the lang at the idiom of this image using the lang attribute inside the img element. So if you are using the alt in the page is in Portuguese and the alt attribute would be in English, you can set the language of the page directly on inside the img element. You can define the English, and the text could be in English also.
Okay, interesting. There's another one which is slightly similar to this, which is it possible to have multilingual alt tags? So if you're serving a page and you want to say the same thing once in English, once in French, once in Chinese, is it possible to attach multiple languages of alt tags to an image?
To a single image?
Yes, yeah, I guess so.
I think it's possible, but I think you need to change using JavaScript because it's possible only to have one alt attribute for each image. So you need to change considering the new web page. You need to consider for each idiom. You need to change probably by JavaScript, but you cannot have multiple alt attributes at the same image.
Okay, and another one from Twitter. And remember, if you want to ask a question, use Twitter, use hashtag ID24. This one, this is interesting, I think. You were talking about search results and how the various search engines deal with these. Do search engines show any particular text or any particular error if you don't have an alt tag, or if you've got an empty alt tag?
Yes, I don't know how they work with the empty alt tag. In fact, if you have an empty alt tag, the image search will catch the text right above the image. Well, in fact, before the image. If you have a paragraph before and an image in sequence, probably the Google will take this first paragraph to consider the description of the image in a search for image. That's why we focus on people describing the image using the alt attribute, because you can set the content of the image directly and save to Google. Oh, this is the description of the image. So you can use this when somebody is performing a search on Google Images, for example.
Brilliant. Okay.
But
sorry, carry on.
I just include information about other search engine tools, because we tried the same the same test in using Google, DuckDuckGo, and Yahoo, even searching for images, and only Google index the alt attribute in this way.
That's really interesting. Now, you've talked a huge amount about image tags, but we've got different sorts of media now. So I'm thinking with the audio tag or with the video tag, are there elements, sorry, is there a way to have alt text or an equivalent for audio and video, or is it just restricted to images?
Yes, alt is restricted for images. If I'm not wrong, you can use title attribute in audio and video, but they are not indexed by search engine. We're trying to study how and if search engine index content from subtitles, but in our previous tests here, none of them indexed content from like a VTT subtitle. None of them index this content. But if I'm not wrong, only the title attribute you can use to describe inside the audio or video element, but you can use some other elements inside the audio and video. When you open the audio element, you can insert some paragraphs there for some people who cannot load the video or the audio, and you can put some information there. But I'm not sure how the search engine tools index this content. Probably they index because they are text on the page. So, but I'm not sure. I didn't test this.
Interesting. And then just finally, going back on what you were saying about subtitles, which may or may not be indexed, but you can have, I assume, multiple languages of subtitles with a video file. You're not just restricted to one language. Is that right?
Yeah. You can use other languages, some subtitles in more than one language, but you need to, for subtitles, considering the file for the subtitles, you need one file for each language. But you can use some scripts to change it. But nowadays, I think most of the browsers support the multi-language for subtitles, and it's easy to set it.
Fantastic. Well, I think that's all the questions that we've had on Twitter. So thank you very much for answering them.
No, and again, thank you so much for the invitation. I'm very happy to be part of this event. I was watching some presentation there. It's an amazing. Congratulations again.
Well, yes, I'd just like to echo that. Thank you very much for participating. It was a fantastic presentation. Just a reminder to those of you watching at home, if you did like this session, please hit that like button, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel as well so we can keep you in the loop for any future events. Just a final reminder that Inclusive Design 24 is brought to you in partnership with the Barclays Access, the Paciello Group, Intopia, Microsoft Edge, and Open Access Technologies. And with special thanks to our sponsors, DQ Systems. We'd also like to thank our co-host for the last couple of hours, Terrence Eden. He did a fantastic job. We're all willing to hand over our hosting duties to you going forward if you'd like them. If not, we'll join you all at the top of the hour with a brand new set of hosts and a new co-host. Thank you all for tuning in, and we'll see you at the top of the hour.